Controller services and what we need. I will just try to get rid of them, and then we are going to use user entity is fine. Here this is the user entity which is talking about what we are storing. Okay, I will be adding a couple of more attributes to this. This is not enough. And the auth and the user, I will delete these because we are going to create our authentication controller services, a user controller, user services, and we are going to write them from the scratch. Okay, so what is the next thing? How we are going to design all those things together? That is the important part. And here we have app auth. So we are going to create do lots of things here also, like inside authentication we can create all the controllers, DTOs and services, or inside domain I can just create auth. Authentication module, and there is another module is user module, and then we have to spin up all the different things inside these. We need to have a DTOs. Okay, like I will just create a DTOs, and inside DTO, let's say, because we are going to create two different APIs, login and register, but first we will create a controller. Auth.controller.ts, auth.service.ts. Inside authentication I will keep adding these files. So what all you need to build an API inside a NestJS, you need these all are NestJS building block: creating service, creating controllers, creating DTOs, creating validation pipes or interface and all. So controller services, and what we need: controller will expose the API routes, and controller services will be injected inside a controller. You can also have a DAO layer, data access layer, which actually talks about the type ORM repositories. Here we are using type ORM repositories, and we are talking about user authentication, so we don't need a separate entity, right? Here we will be creating the entities and all inside the user. So here it will be user entity.ts. User will also have a DTO folder, and then we will add user controller.ts. Okay, user module.ts. User service.ts, that is the last file we have, user service.ts. Okay, similarly inside auth we are going to add lots of other things. First of all, I think we forgot auth module, auth.module.ts, because we are going to do the authentication, local authentication, where you are going to enter username, password, and then we are going to use JWT strategies to send you to intercept the cookies post login coming to the server side, or we are going to use this strategy to authorize or validate the token which is coming inside a cookies, because you will have some protected route. Let's say I'm going to add a posts module also here, which is all about adding the post, creating the categories and all. So this is a post folder, and then there is another folder we have is category. So let's say I'm creating a simple blogging platform where only a logged in user can access that post APIs, create post APIs. Okay, for that we need to use the JWT strategies, auth strategies, to validate whatever the token coming inside a session or inside authorization header is valid, because you can send these tokens in multiple different ways. Either you can send them inside a cookies, or you can send them inside a authorization headers. Okay. Okay, so we have all these modules here. This is user. Inside user, we'll have a controller, module, and service. Similarly, in the authentication, that contains auth controller, auth service, and auth module. Now, rest all are creating the guards, local authentication guards, and JWT strategy or local strategy, so that user can log in by just entering the username password. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to create authentication controller, authentication service, all these things inside it, and all the local strategies and all. Create auth controller. So auth controller is there. Auth service we already have. Apart from that, what all we need? So let's start with auth controller. So what the simple controller contains? A simple imports. Let's say this is our simple auth controller, right? What this auth controller is doing, if you look into this, it is importing the auth service. So here we might be exporting auth service. So let's first create auth service. And how we create service in the NestJS, we just use injectable, right? And then here we can export class authentication service. Okay, this authentication service will have the same constructor, and inside a constructor we are going to inject the dependencies for this service, and then it is going to have all the methods which the controller can use, like the register, login, all these methods: register, login, generate session cookies based on once username password user is entering correctly, so verify password, create a session token, all those sort of methods we are going to create inside this. So here the thing is, because this is authentication controller and authentication service, we also have this user domain where we also have a user service. So all the operations which are related to the user, like find the user based on this email, find the user based on this password, will be done through the user service. So all those operations will be externalized to this. Otherwise, we will be using JWT service and config service that is local to this. But this auth module is dependent on the user module, because here we are going to add a dependency on the user service. So this is expected, right? Because auth service and auth module will be dependent on the user module to find the user in the database. So here we can also write the user service to fill in the blank, because here user service will be first, and inside a user service we will just do the same injectable. I can copy the same. So here is my user service. I'll just replace it with the user service, right? And it has a constructor, and inside a constructor, because this is going to access this user entity, the user entity is also empty, so I'm just trying to add the user entity first. And how we do the entity in the type ORM, we just annotate it with entity. This is the type ORM expression. We see if we are able to get it. Then we can just class user or export class user, export default, maybe do it default user. So this is like a user entity, or and this entity we are importing from, is it the type ORM not added here? So we are just trying to fill in the blanks. Type ORM is there, this type ORM is there, and let me check if node module is there. Yes, it is there. Sometimes it's just a TypeScript which is not giving me things to import. So this is will be imported from type ORM, all the column properties and all. So this is the class user, and now here I will be just adding all the columns. So what all columns we have in our table? So what all columns we have? Primary key ID, email, name, exclude also we can add, like exclude when you are performing the queries, exclude will be used to not return the password from the entity, because we don't want, when you do a get user by id, we don't want to return the password also in the select all query. Or there is another attribute you can do is inside a column, there is a property you can specify which is select false, I guess. I will try to show it. So inside a column also we can specify the multiple properties. Yes, select false. That will also do the same thing. That means is this column will be not be selected in the type ORM queries. Okay, this is exclude, and then this is also a column. So I will just try to build this little fast. So we have a password, and then what do I have is I also have the post domain. Post domain means user will also be dependent on, user can write a multiple post, and only the logged in user would be able to create a post. So we will create some kind of a relationship with the user and the post. For now this is like simple stuff. Here we have user entity, and let's keep these simple 3-4 properties. So this is user entity, and inside a user service we can inject the repository. This is how we create a service, right? Here what we are going to do is inject repository, and the repository is user that we will import, and here it is private user repo that we are going to use to access the table, and this is repository of type user. So using this user repo we would be able to access the user. So, and you can just define all the methods of sync, get by email, sorry, this will be outside. This is your constructor, and here inside this you can have all the different methods, get by email, get by id. I will try to add a couple of these. Get by id, and we are going to use this type ORM repositories to access that. So this is pretty much simple. Get by email, what we need to do, we just need to pass the email property to this, and here we are going to access user repo dot find one, and if it is doesn't found, we can throw the http exception, and http status is like not found, that we can import, and this email is we are going to receive as a string. And why this is complaining, user repo dot find one. Okay, we need to pass the where clause. Okay, so we are just doing dot find one, give me this user, or get by id. Get by id also we can do it in the same way. So here also we can do, now this will be done by id. So we are getting id as a string, because id is, I think, primary generated column. Okay, so either we can just make this id as a uuid, so that id will be a string that we will convert, and then here instead of where id equal to this, id will be a string. Okay, find operator id is number. So first of all, let's convert this id into a string and convert this id as an auto generated uuid column. Okay, so this is the get by id, and then similarly we have a create. The create we need, otherwise we can skip other methods. Create, inside this you need to have a user data, and there is a type we need to create. So inside this interface, user DTO, I think we have an interface. So here we can create user DTO.ts, and what this DTO contains, this DTO simply contains, okay, what all properties you want by creating a user. We need email, name, and the password. Okay, you can also add a validations. So first we will build it and then we will add the missing pieces, like, okay, because we are using class validator, so here we can add a API properties and the validation to each and every property. Okay, this is of type email, this is a password with minimum length, name should be required, all those validations. So here we can use class validator, and I will also import all the required things. So this is like export class API property, and how we can annotate all these things, because these things will also be exposed to the API property, and inside API property we can specify all the payload properties. Okay, what this API property means, description, okay, if it is required or not, required true, okay, and then example value, that is just for Swagger doc, like how the email looks like, right? And then this is the public email string. Here you can also add some validations, like it should be is defined and is email. This will be used by class validator. Okay, same thing we can add to other places. This is about name, this is about password. So password will be, okay, min length would be, let's say, 6. Okay, it should be min length, it is coming from class validator, 6 password. Okay, you can put anything in the password. It is just class validator, and this is defined, this is required, name is also defined, and it should be of type string. Okay, this is the name. So in the description, okay, this is talking about name, this is talking about email of user, some description about it, password with min 6 length. So this is a DTO, and Swagger docs will be exposed all these validation criteria for us. Now create user DTO, because this is being used inside a user service. Create user DTO. Here we are creating a user. So what we are doing is we are creating a user based on the payload. So here what we will do is we will just write a code, because now we are getting the user. Const new user equal to await this dot user repo dot create. Simply just pass the user data and it will create a user, and then await this dot user repo dot save new user. There are many ways of doing it. Either you can just pass the whole payload here and it will create a user, and you can just return the new user from here. Return new user. Okay, that's it. So this is how we are doing create. Now we are just building a simple authentication, right? So I think these 3 methods are more than enough. And now this user service will be added inside a user module, right? How we create a simple module is we just use module, because we are defining a NestJS module. So all the imports will go here. Then we have providers, then we have exports, what all we are exporting from this module, and then controllers. So controllers, obviously we are going to have a user controller, so I will just create a simple template for it. So this is controller, and then here I can just simply say export class user controller, so we can export it. Here this is a constructor, and inside constructor there will be a dependency injection of user service, private read only user service. This is how we do the dependency injection, and then we will just define the methods inside a controllers. Okay, this is the API route, so we'll start with the users. and then here you define all the methods. I will be doing it. I'm just creating the controller first, creating the module. Inside imports, are we importing anything? We need a type ORM module at least, so we'll use type ORM module dot for feature because we are accessing the user entity here. User is a part of user entity, and then providers means any services we are using. User service, export this user service from here and export this module by adding a class. Export class user module. Okay, what is the issue with this? Can't find this. We'll import it. So I mean, this is how you create basic things. We have module, we have service, we have entity, we have controller. That means this is a full-fledged module, and this module can be used across any other module. So for now we are going to use it inside an authentication module. Authentication module also we can initialize. I will just try to copy the user module stuff and will replace things there. And controller is also we can use. We already have something in this service. Okay, inside authentication service, now let's go one by one. Inside authentication service, we check, we can add the dependency of user service only when this user module is added as a provider, right, inside a module. So this is the auth module. Here I can access user service only if I am importing a user module. User module, now I can access because user module is exporting the services, so that service I can use inside a auth module. And then similarly, what all I'm going to access here, type ORM, we are not going to access any entity here because all the database operations are happening inside a user service, inside a user module. And we are going to use GWT modules and all the other things here. Similarly, the providers will be authentication service. I will just check authentication service, auth service. This we can also export, and the controller is auth controller. Okay, and then here it will become authentication module. Okay, the user module we can import from the user module, remove all these things which we don't need. So we will add all the other modules which is needed by the authentication module because we are going to use JWT, passport and all. Okay, so what is the next thing? How we are doing it? If you remember, we also created a packages here, right? App logger, app config. For app database, we also created a database package. So those packages we are going to use in this application. Because how we are doing, we are not using type ORM module dot as async, right? All these things are happening in this database module. If you remember, this is how we have created a database module in the last video. So you can see type ORM module dot for root async. We created it as a separate package so that we can use this package in any of the application which we are creating in our system. So how would we initialize? There will be a domain module we are going to create, which is a root module, domain module, and here we will be defining all our auth module, database module, all the things. So let's clean this up. Auth module, DB module is fine. Let's remove the necessary stuff from here. Okay, now user module. So we need to import a user module and auth module, because this is the domain module is a root module which is sitting on top of authentication module and the user module. And here we are initializing our database module user. So there is a user entity we have. I will pass it. So this is how we are initializing the database module by passing for root. So this is our module. This is the code we have written, right? And then provider services, and then we also are going to have some middleware that is going to, so this is just a logger middleware, that is fine. Auth middleware, or we can use auth guard. So we will decide that how to do it. So this is the class, We will decide this code if we want to use this. Okay, so this is domain module. This is the root module, and this domain module can be used by this app module, because root, what do we have in the root? App module. So we just need to import domain module there. Domain module is importing the auth module, user module, and also we are going to have post module, right? Inside a post we can create a simple entity. For now, let's say here I have a user module. I will copy this, put this inside a post. So what is the use of it? Because we are going to create some post APIs. So this is the post module, and I will be creating some entities later that I can import here. So we will be just working on this later once we are done with the user module. But this is how we will be exporting this, and then we can import this inside our domain module. Okay, we also have another module, let's say post module, that will be for creating a post and publishing the post for the logged in user. So you need to be authenticated for that. Okay, there is a typo. So I will fix the folder name, authentication. Just rename it authentication. Okay, now let's work on authentication first. We are inside authentication controller. So what we are doing with the authentication controller is we have a simple implementation. Let's say the login, register, logout. Okay, so authentication service. I will just start creating the routes and all. Post. So we are also going to use Swagger, because Swagger will expose these API spec to the Swagger URL. So we will also register a Swagger module. I think we might be already using it. Let me check. Create document. Yes, we are using a Swagger module already. So we just need to use these Swagger annotations properly so that we can expose the API docs. That what all API status code this particular endpoint can return, what will be the data this API will return once it is successfully executed, what should be the status code, what will be the data format, what will be the data format for the payload, what are the types. All these information can be exposed through the Swagger. So what we will do is we will just use some proper annotations to write our controllers so that we can expose as much information as we want. So here, let's say we are creating a post authentication. I think we can just do the register. Okay, this is post, which we can, and now here we just define all the other methods. Okay, what is the HTTP code? So I can say HTTP code register is 201. Okay, and this is simple async. And here we can define lots of other things. Let's say API consumes. So all these things will be exposed to the Swagger. I think I have already covered all these things in the detailed. API consumes, and you can just set application JSON. Okay, then API OK response. Let's say API is successful, and for OK response like 200, but this is going to return 201. So there are different annotations available for that. API created response, that means once API has successfully executed it, then what will be the response and all will be available. So description, user registered successfully, and you can also specify type. Okay, what will be what you are going to return from this. So there is a type property, and this is the custom type response property type you are going to create, that we will create like what the register API should return. Okay, and then there are other annotations you can specify. Okay, let's say if there is internal server error, all these methods you can specify. Let's say you are doing a delete, so always create should return 200, 201. Let's say if there is a put, then you can just do API OK response, API no content response. All these annotations you can use to just expose the Swagger spec properly. Now, register. So what we are doing a register, and here we need a register DTO. So I will just use a register DTO that we need to create. So what register DTO says is it should have, I will just create here register.dto, and we have already created a DTO in last section. So I will just use this for now, and we can enrich this by using these API properties. So Swagger docs can expose all these properties. So this is the email API property you can import from NestJS Swagger. So this is the email which you are expecting in the sign up API, and the name. So this is the name property, and I think this is also required, not empty. And then there is a password obviously required in order to add a minimum validations if you want. This is the password required true. Okay, mil length, let's keep it as a 6, same as the login API. Is not empty, is defined, or is not empty is kind of similar. So this is the register DTO. Inside a controller, you import register DTO. This is how we create a simple post API. Now inside this body, you have received the payload which you are sending through the request. And what we do is return this dot authentication service, and here we are going to create a register method, and we are going to pass this body. So there should be a register method which should be able to handle this data. It's a simple method we are going to write inside auth service. So our first method will be public async register. Okay, and what you are passing to this method is payload, right? I will just say body, and which is register DTO. I mean, you can just say register body DTO or something like that. And here we will start working on getting data from this body. You can extract all these properties if you want. So what we are getting is email, name, password, and start creating a user. So what we will do, first we will create a hash password by using bcrypt. So we need to use this bcrypt library. Let's say if we already have it, so we'll import the bcrypt library to create a hash version of the password. We will add it. So we are going to use a lots of new libraries here, bcrypt, JSON web token, and all. This is the hash, and we have already the password, and pass the sort value. Okay, and then either we can wrap everything inside a try catch. If there is an error, what you can do is throw a new HTTP exception, and here you can just pass the message some error occurred, and you can just say HTTP status dot internal server error occurred. Or there are predefined exceptions also. What you can do is throw new internal server exception. This also you can do, and you can just pass the error object. There are many ways of doing it. You can throw the HTTP exceptions or use these custom pre-built exceptions. Okay, and here what we are doing is const created user equal to await, and here we are going to use this dot user service dot create, right? User service already has this create method, so we are doing is body, this body payload which we have already have, and then we'll just override the password value, password with the hash password. That's so created user, because we need to hash the password before we do it. Created user dot password, we'll just set it as undefined once it is created, and then we just return it. Return return created user. I mean, simple implementation you can do by just writing a single file in the Express. We are just learning like how we can build a production ready applications using NestJS. If there is an error, so the error can come due to different reasons. Either what we can do is, because email may be unique, here if you see user entity, there is a unique property. That means if you try to insert the new record with the same email, either you do the check before registering the email. So this is user service, right? Okay, we are doing a create. So I will do one single thing to prevent any issues. User data dot email dot lowercase. So user data dot email dot lowercase. So we know what email property we are storing, and then inside this user service only, or here while registering it, we can do the first find by email. If user already exists, we can throw the exception. So here const is user exists, right? We can just do the check this dot user service dot find user by email. Await this dot user service dot get by email. So what we can do is we can just pass the email which we are receiving. If what is it throwing an exception, http not found exception, that is not good. What we can do in this case is we can just we can return null. If it is there, then we can return null. Exceptions we can throw at the receiver end, because we need to see if we are receiving null or not. So now if user exists, let's say if user exists is user exists. So let's say if it is null, if it is not null, right? If user exists, that means so new conflict exception. There is conflict exception means user already exists, right? And here email dot to lowercase. Conflict exceptions, user with email already exists. Something like this you can do instead of getting an exception from the database, because if you insert with the same email, here also you can handle it that for a particular error code you can customize the response. Okay, user with error code with this already exists, something like this. So here you will check is error dot code equal to, so there is some error code for this Postgres error code dot unique violation or something like that. I am not able to recall it. If it is there, can we import it? Postgres error codes, that is coming from some, we can create a custom error codes. So there is a unique violation error code, there is a specific error code is returned, Postgres error code dot unique violation. If it is equal to this, that means you can just throw this custom exception, conflict exception, that user already exists with this email, right? So we don't need to do it because we are checking the user already exists or not. If user already exists and it is not returning null, that means throw the conflict exception. Otherwise, allow user to create and return the user. So this is all about our simple sign up. Now we'll go to the controller, and this is our register. We can just do the other implementations like login and all. So we can just do a simple login. Here status code will be 200, post will be login, application JSON, user logged in successfully. Logged in successfully, and this is going to be the login and body. This we can use a login DTO. I mean, this is a simple same method. So here we are going to specify. Now the important point is here you are trying to do the login, right? So you will be passing the username and the password in the payload, and then we will be validating, okay, user really exists or not. Okay, so either we pass the payload here, but I want to do it in a little different way. Why? I will explain why I'm going to do here is, so passport we are going to use, and passport provide a local strategy or GWT strategy, and local strategy is all about, okay, you are entering the username password, and it will just validate. You just need to specify what is the username field, and from the body it will extract your username, and it will check that username password matches or not. So we need to just create a local strategy and local authentication guard, and we will put the guard on top of login. So whoever is hitting the login, that guard will execute first. That guard will check your username password, and then only it will allow you to access. So that means whatever you are going to do, I mean, there are many ways. You just pass the login DTO here, enter get the username password, and do the validation of, okay, I got the email password, check the email in the user service and compare the password using bcrypt.compare. That's one way. Or if you want to make it little nicer, then you can use authentication guard and use the local authentication strategy. Okay, so what we are going to do here is, this is our authentication, and here we are going to create local authentication guard, local.auth.guard.ts, and here another file I'm going to create is strategy.ts. We are also going to create a GWT strategy and all. So what local strategy will do here, I will just, because this is an injectable class, here I will just say export class local strategy extends passport strategy, and here you can specify your strategy. Let me see if we have all these modules already added. Passport strategy, and then inside a constructor we will just define, okay, we are using authentication service and username field. So first of all, let's import all the modules. So here we are going to add all the required modules. I think there are lots of modules are missing, so add them. cd apps, NestJS, REST API, auth, and here I will do pnpm add, keep it up. We can just do pnpm add. So we need a cookie parser because we are going to return cookies, and we need a passport, then we need a passport JWT, and we need a passport local. Okay, these are the some of the modules which I need. Not npm, it's pnpm add, sorry for that. Okay, pnpm add cookie parser. What is the error here? Okay, passport, there is a typo. Passport JWT, passport local, passport cookie parser. So it is adding all the required modules, and we can also add the typings. Typings is also required. So we have added all the required modules here in the package JSON. I added a bcrypt also, passport, passport JWT, and passport local. And now we will just go back to our code and we'll start writing local strategy. So this passport strategy we are going to import. So passport strategy, that is going to come from NestJS passport. Okay. Is it something we have missed? So I will add this dependency. Something is always missing. These are just like the types, and then this strategy is going to come from passport local, and then this passport strategy is coming from, and it will take some time maybe. So I will just import this passport strategy from NestJS passport, and here it is going to have a constructor. Inside a constructor, we are going to inject our authentication service. Authentication service. Okay, and then here it is going to call the parent class constructor using super, and then inside a super we are going to pass the username field. Username field is something missing there. Let me see why it's not populating. So I mean, when you are passing things in the payload, what is the username? So email is considered as a username field here, and then once it validates, then we are going to compare. We are going to pass email and the password to our method. So it's like same thing we used to do in the Node.js passport local API. On that endpoint, we were just passing the email and the password, and using local strategy, we were just comparing the username password to our API database. I mean, inside a database. And here, return. What is the advantage of you? If I will tell you, using this strategy, once you do the login, you will return the current session of the user, and that session of the user will get added to the request.user object. So here return this authentication service. Here we are going to define get authenticated user. So this is our auth service, and auth service we are going to add a new method which is something like public async get auth user, and here you are passing email and the password, string, and password is of type string. And how we will do it? First we will try to validate if this data is correct, because if user is not found, then we are going to just return HTTP exception, right? Wrong credential provided or something like that. If it is valid, then how we are going to access that? Const user equal to await this dot user service dot get by email, right? First of all, we are going to see if email is user is there with this email to lowercase. If user is there, let's say if user is there, then we are going to proceed further, and here we are going to verify the password. Await this dot verify, because it's a bcrypt compare. So plain text password, I mean this is the word which we are getting from the request payload. So here we are passing two arguments, text password and the user dot password. Okay, and this verify password, we can define this method. This is the private method we are going to use, private async. This is verify password, and it is taking two arguments. One is the plain password, another is the hash password. Text password, which is also of type string, and then next password, which is of type string. Okay, and then we will just use a bcrypt here. Const is match found. We can just use await bcrypt. Bcrypt.compare is a method, and it takes two arguments, plain text password and hashed password. That's it. This we can return. If they are not matching, we can throw the exception from here, or verify user. Yeah, we can throw an exception here. If password is not matching, is match found is false, we can throw new HTTP exception. I mean, we can just throw new bad request exception or something like that. There are many ways of doing it, and we can just say invalid credential passed. Anything you want, and then verify password we are calling here. So if verify password is everything is good, we will just return the user. So let's say if it is not returning the exception, that means everything is good. And here if user is there, if user is not there also, then also we need to throw an exception here. Bad request exception, right? Let's say the email match not found, user is null, then bad request exception. So we can just make a proper message, invalid credential provided, invalid username password provided. So this is simple method which you are going to access get auth user from your local strategy. So here we auth service dot get auth user, and we are passing email and password. And why we are returning it? So when you are returning it, this data will be available on your request object. So this is the local strategy, and we can create a local auth guard for it. It will also be an injectable class. There is just another way of doing it. Otherwise you can also do it in the same way. Export class local auth guard, okay, that extends auth guard from the NestJS passport, and the name here is the local, because you can create a multiple auth guards, and this local auth guard I'm going to add to my controller where I'm doing a login. So this is my controller, and here I can add this. How to add this? So there is a notation use guard, and inside a use guard you can just specify which guard you want, local auth guard. Okay, and then because when you are doing it, once everything is successful, everything will be added inside a request object. And here we need to override request with user, because now it's not plain request object. This is a request object which contains the user object. So request with user, we can create a simple type here, interface. Inside authentication I can create a simple type request with user.ts, and here we create this custom type. So this user we are adding at import, and this request with user I will add inside auth controller. So this is how I will do the login. And once you receive, because why I'm doing it, because this authentication and comparing password I have redirected using local auth guard. Now here I'm getting the user object from the request. So that user object I can access to create a token, GWT token, session token, or whatever. And here I'm just creating const cookies, because I'm going to return the cookies. So I'm going to have a this.auth service, this.auth service dot get cookies with GWT token. This is the method I'm going to write, and I'm going to pass user, maybe use the whole user object with GWT token. So I'm going to define this method there. Here let's say this is public async. It was async method or what? Because okay, we are not calling await. So this is the public method, and then this is the user object which is of user entity. And then how we are doing it, so this is authentication service, and here we are getting the cookies. So first of all, get the payload, So first we need to create a payload to create a token, right? So inside payload, what I'm saying is I'm going to put the user ID, that is the part of user dot id, and let's say email also I'm putting. So I can just do user dot email, and this we can create a simple interface for it, like what all things I'm adding inside the token. So there is a user ID which is a string, and then there is email which is of type string. This is my token payload. So I'm adding this token payload here. And now, so once you have it, what is the next thing is you need to create a JWT. Users need to use JWT sign. So here are going to use a JWT sign to create a token. So here we are using JSON web token. So how should we do it? We are going to use a JWT service for that. So we are going step by step. So we will use JWT service here, private read only JWT service. JWT service will come from NestJS. So first of all, I think we need to import this NestJS JWT. Let's add that NestJS JWT, and then say so this dot JWT service dot sign. This is what we need to do. Okay, these methods will come soon once the module is installed. So here what it is doing, JWT service dot sign. This is a simple method. I'll just add it. Sign it is part of the payload. It will give you the token, and here we need to return the cookie string, right? So what is the cookie string? Because cookie contains the string and it also contains the expiry. So we will see and first of all, how we are initializing this NestJS JWT module. We need to do it at the module level. So here is our authentication module. Here we need to initialize it properly, right? How we can do it is here we will import a JWT module. The module JWT. Okay, it is always a problem when you are importing a new module. It will not populate. Okay, it is available to me. JWT module dot. Here we just do register async. Right? We are doing a dynamic registration of this module because this module depends on config service. So here we will be using use factory. That is correct. So inside the use factory, there are many ways to initialize the modules. Okay, what all you are importing. I'm dependent on config service. So this config service is coming from config module, and then what we are injecting is the config service. Import is the config module, and we are injecting config service, the part of config module, and then we are doing use factory, and this is a sync method, and what we are passing is config service. Config is of type of config service, and here we are just going to return the config this module options. Right, inside a return statement, what it will be doing, ideally we should have done it like this. Okay, we can return it even after using the arrow function secret. So secret will be used by config dot get. Do we have it? I was using it, so API log level. So we need to define these JWT secret and all these variables. So I will go to this config package, app config, source, config default. Here I can just have two variables. One is the config interface. So let's say auth, which contains auth config of type auth config. This is our simple package which we have. auth config, and this is the interface we are creating. Export class, export interface. It contains two things, secret and expiry. Secret is of type string, and then there is another thing is expiration. That is also a string. We'll convert it. So this is our auth config. So what I will do is inside a default interface, this is required. So auth, secret, expiry, and then inside this service, how we are going to get the auth, because I mean it's just like a custom implementation of auth service which I explained earlier. Here I'm just trying to get these values from the environment variable, that's it, and I'm going to use this auth service in all my packages. So there is expiry is another parameter which we are using. So here is auth secret, and this is auth token expiry, whatever the environment variable you want. Now I will just build this, so these things will be available to my target package, secret and expiry. Okay, here I will go to the authentication module because this is dependent on that. So we have is auth. This will come when we start loading it. So how to adopt the changes? First of all, let's go to our package. What I will do, first of all, I will build this. Building means whatever the I have done in this mini package, configuration package. This looks fine, and then I will try to build our application, which is our application. Express auth app, express TypeScript. Okay, let me see what is the package JSON we have added. So what namespace we have added? This is NestJS. It's 02. Okay, NestJS auth APIs. Same should be available in the next console. We'll reload it. This is our package, and I will try to build this. And you can see in the dependencies, we are already using NestJS config, database, email, HTTP, whatever the dependencies. Okay, once you see, this is building our dependent package first. Okay, that's it. So now it should have added the latest version, latest changes of the config package. So we'll go to the domain authentication service. I just try to show you like how to adopt the changes. So here, if I try to just change it, I can see auth is there now, auth secret. So we need to return two parameters from here, secret and sign in options. Sign in options which contains expire in. Okay, that will be also coming from config service. So I mean that is like you just put the numeric value, and we will add just s to that. So config dot get, how to do it, config dot get dot auth dot expiry. So that will be just a string numeric value we will just add, so it's like a 300 seconds and something like that. So this is how we are creating, initializing the JWT module, and when you do JWT sign, it will use this secret to create the token for you. Okay, that is like the secret sauce. And here it is dependent on the config module also, which we are getting externally, config module, user module also, because we are using passport. And this is our auth module, passport module, user module. And inside providers, now we have local strategy, and we will add a JWT strategy when we create it. That's it. Okay, so this is a simple authentication we have created, which is end to end. We will try to test it. What we are going to do now is we will also create a JWT strategy that is all about, okay, let's say what I'm doing from here inside from auth service. Here I created a token. Okay, I also need to return the token, that is a missing piece. So what we are doing, I just need to create a simple string. Okay, what is the expiry of the cookies and all, because the expiry of the cookies should be same as the expiry of the token. So I can also inject the config service here, that we can do already. Config service, and here it is, config service coming from this package. And because why we need it is, this is the string we are creating. Once you receive the token, you can simply return authentication equal to the token which we have received, and then here we need to get the maximum expiry of the cookie, that we can get using this dot config service dot get dot auth dot expiry. That's it. Okay, so this is get cookies with JWT token, and that is what we are doing inside auth controller. This is, we have received the cookies, and how we return the cookies from the controller, right? Because we have got the cookies, and now we can just do a response. It's a request, right? So we can simply set response is of type res response, that should be coming from express. Okay, and we can simply say is response dot, I think there is a method response dot set header. Inside this you can just do a set cookies, and your cookie string. So we already received it, and then response dot send. I think that should work. Okay, because here we are using response, request response, so it's a simple login. Once you do the login, there is a simple logout also we can add. What the logout will do is, here also we can just use, here logout means you need to be already logged in, that means your such session must exist. So here we are going to use some JWT auth guard that will make sure that you are valid, you have a valid session. Okay, application JSON user logged out successfully. And here this is the method logout, and inside logout you will use the same request object. And what we need to do, once you do the logout, we need to set the cookies to the empty, right? Okay, so here we can call the method get cookies for logout, and this method we can define inside our authentication service. Get cookies for logout auth service, simple, it just reset the cookies for us. And then okay, here also we are accessing the response. I will try to get it from here, because it is also setting the cookies once you do the logout. And here get cookies for logout, you don't need to pass the user. Set cookies empty, response dot send, this is the logout. And now finally we need to add the JWT strategy also. So if I try to draw it on the simple chart, how it looks like, the whole process. So this is also important, like what we are doing here. This is our, let's say the user module, and this is, let's say, our auth module and user module. User module is accessing the data from the database. This is our auth module. Okay, so we are also using these strategies. What we are using is local strategy, and then there is another thing is JWT strategy. And what we are doing, once you do the login, and we are using this bcrypt, and once you are doing a login, what we are doing is we are creating a token, set the token inside a cookies, and send. So we are actually sending the cookies, and the cookies can be HTTP only and all. And once you do the logout, you will be coming back, and we will be extracting your JWT token from cookies, validate session, and then return empty cookies. I mean, just reset your cookies. That's it. So this is your logout flow. And inside auth, we are using controller service and all. Inside user, we are also using the same. And this auth module is dependent on this, and both has the controller. So user has a user APIs, which will be using this auth guard. So inside auth, let's talk about the login. Login route is using login auth guard, which is using local strategy, right? That is simple login. Okay. And when it comes to all the protected API routes, there you will be using a JWT auth guard. Let's say this is the protected API. There you will be using JWT auth guard. What that auth guard will check, okay, inside a cookies you are sending a token, that is valid or not. If that is valid, it will just add a user object on the request.user. Same thing is being done by this local strategy. It is also doing the same thing. It is putting the data of user on the request.user, and then you can access the request.user in your APIs. Okay, so simple controller services methods we have written. We are using big crypto sign and we are using type ORM. So this is simple type ORM we are using. I don't think we have written anything complex in the type ORM right now. So we have just have user entity, even not any relationship. Then we will have another, okay, let's say I have a post entity, right? So there will be some APIs. Post will also use this auth guard, JWT auth guard, to protect the APIs, and it will be using, once user session exists and everything is good, then it will be having just another entity, type ORM entity, which is post. Because from this auth guard we have validated that user session exists and valid, then it will put the user object on the request, and you can create a post and populate the author data and all. So it's like a simple analogy of building a simple authentication service. You can just, if you don't want to use a local strategy or login auth guard, you can skip it. What you can do is, inside your login method, get the email password, compare with the database and all, and just return the cookies. So what we are doing is, we are using JWT NestJS passport JWT. That is another library. Passport JWT, we are doing asynchronous initialization of this, right? This we are using to create the token, sign, verify, all those things will happen through this internally. And it is being used by this JWT strategy and JWT auth guard. So let's add the missing pieces in our code. I will be adding this JWT strategy. So JWT strategy is simple. What JWT strategy looks like, I will just talk about it, because it's not rocket science, it's same thing. I copied the same code here. So we need config service, which we can get from conf, and this is the user service. Okay, and secret and key, we can get this from this dot config service dot get auth dot secret, and this is your token payload. I think we defined this interface somewhere, that contains the user ID and email. Token payload, okay, let's put it any. We already know that it contains the user ID and email inside a token payload. Super must be called before. This is a JWT strategy. So what we are accessing the config service, config service dot get auth secret, and we are passing payload. So what we are doing here is, if you remember extract jwt.x from extractor, here what we are doing is we are trying to extract the jwt token from this cookies, right? Request.cookies.authentication, because in the same cookie name we are setting it once you are doing the login. So we go to jwt token, we will verify it, and once the verification is done, we can decode the payload, because this is the decoded payload in the validate method that contains the user id, and this data will be added inside a request.user, and you'll access it in your controllers and route. Similarly, we created auth guard that we can use at all the APIs which are protected. Let's say the logout. Here we will be using this auth guard. So similarly, let's say if you want to fetch your own user profile, so this is the logout, right? If you just wanted to fetch your own user data, right, simply get / users get. So authentication, so it will just to authenticate, and it will give you the user object. So what all different API routes we have on this: authentication register, authentication login, logout, and a simple authentication that will check, okay, user session exists, then I will give you the return you the request.user object. Now it's all. Now it's time to test this implementation, and we also need to start this app, and we already have this entity created, user entity. So it will create this database table there inside entity. I think we can specify the name also. Yes, name. I just want to have a table name as a users. Let's do the testing for this. So now let's go step by step. I will do first of all build. This is an X console you can use, that the build is happening properly or not, and then I will also do docker compose up to see, because we have docker compose at the root of the project, which contains the Postgres. So I will just do docker compose up so that we can have this database running on port 5432, and it is using test API database. Okay, it has a MongoDB also inside this container, and then Postgres. We are more interested in the Postgres. Server started, database created, test API. Okay, we are good here. I will use the test API, same inside in my implementation environment. Here test API, and let's see what all environment variables we need. We can get it from, because we added two auth variables that contains auth secret and auth token expiry. Auth secret and auth token expiry. Auth secret is anything, auth token expiry, let's say 300 seconds. Okay, database URL we have populated. So our container is running, build is happening. Now let's start the application and troubleshoot any errors if we see. Okay, so now let's start our application. You can use NX console, or you can go to the directory and do npm run start dev. So this is 02 NestJS API, auth API, and I can see it started. Okay, the thing is we are using this typo NestJS database module, and we are using this database package. So I think I already have a synchronization true. That means when you change in the entity, it will automatically reflect in the database when you restart it. So this will create this entity. So now we can test our implementation. This is running on which port? This is main.ts API v1 port, and port we are passing this environment variables, and port is 3010. And here we can see our APIs. I will just try to enter hello, because it is using basic auth to protect your Swagger docs. Okay, simply this is authorization. Health check APIs. Okay, simply, and here we can just see all these API endpoints, login, register, and all. I didn't test it, and you can see these API specs. that the request body contains this sample payload that is coming from our DTUs, because we have defined what is required, what is not required. And if I try to create it, okay, it has created it. That's a smart. I mean, you can see this is the response body: email, password, name, and ID. ID is auto incremented. So either we can use a UUID for this, so we can make a changes, required changes for that. So if we want to have a UUID instead of this auto incremented primary key, we can go to user entity and then primary generated column and type is UUID. That's it. Now it will restart. I mean, when you see the 5 changes, it will try to apply those changes in the database. Okay, you can see here drop constraint primary key, drop column ID, users, it is adding the ID with the UUID constraint, right? This is the UUID generate v4 and it is adding the primary key constraint. That is all happening through the, because we have a typo rm sync true. Now I can just do the create again, and this is coming correctly, right? Because we have this status code 500, user with email already exists. That is also working. So I'll just make it is email 1 and the user created successfully. And then I will also try to do the login. Okay, so the thing is, because we are not passing this body DTO in the login, how can we test this API? Okay, let me just think, because currently it will just send unauthorized, because we are not passing the username password for the passport local. So in this case, what we can do, we can use this insomnia tool. I will try to show you. We can use this insomnia tool to hit this from the postman like tool, because the Swagger is not showing it because we are not using the login DTO. I'm talking about this particular piece here. Here is authentication, auth controller. And if you see our login API, we are not passing any DTO. So if you're not passing DTO, that won't be reflected in the body of the Swagger. You can see that this is not showing any kind of a body part, right? So let's try to pass this thing, email 1, through the postman. So there is an email and then there is a password, and we will send it. And here you can see this is what we got. I can also try to do the sign up API through this client only. So to avoid any confusion, auth login, auth register. So this is auth register, post. Okay, null value for the column name. Okay, sorry, it's a name for us, email name and password. Yeah, so this is the user has been created in the system. Now we can do the login with the same. There is one thing, I mean, it should have thrown us this password validation error, right? Because we are not satisfying this DTO validation. But why that is happening? Are we using the validation pipe? For now it will pass, right? Because we already created this user, and you can see this token is being set, and the token, cookies, authentication, and this cookies, right? And now if I try to access simple authentication get, and I will just call it is get auth simple authentication, then 500 internal server error. So we will see that what curl request we are sending for this. Okay, API v1 authentication. Okay, we'll try to figure that out. First of all, our login is working fine. We are getting all the headers which we need, because we are not returning data. We are just setting a cookies, and then we are returning it. And here you can see the auth login register, both are working fine. And if you change the email, that is already working. Now the thing we need to check about the authentication API, right? That once you logged in, we are sending the data in the headers, So this is our request headers, and I don't see the cookies going here. This is cookies set, right? Okay, many cookies has been set. I will try to remove them. So we need to set this cookies. Done. Let me see. These are request headers and cookies are not set, right? Managed cookies, localhost. Done. Will it send these cookies? Because it's all about that this cookie is not being sent inside the request. If it will start, okay, this is authentication. This is our cookies, accept and all. And then we are getting this. Something may be wrong with the environment variable. Let's see this. I will try to get rid of this thing. Okay, are we getting any error? Let's try to debug this simple thing. Okay, it is showing unknown authentication strategy JWT. Okay, that is good thing. At least we know we have some error. So our login is working, our register is successfully, everything is happening as expected. Authentication.register, authentication.login. We are getting these cookies in the response for the login. Now this is authentication and we have logout also. So JWT authentication guard, auth guard JWT. So let's go to JWT strategy. We need to specify what strategy we are using. So let's see our JWT strategy. So because we are using, when we are using multiple strategy, I think there is another argument which is name, which is I think JWT. Let me check in the documents. So that is the only fix we need to perform. After that, once the JWT strategy is identified, it will get the token from the cookies, validate the user, and will return the user on the request object. So, I mean, these are the different ways in which we can check our authentication. Like you do the login, I return the cookies. So this is the cookies we are returning, and then because these are the HTTP only cookies, you can see these are attached to the domain localhost, and these cookies will be sent automatically to the relevant request. So once you send it, like in the fetch auth, you should be able to decode the cookies and get the JWT token from it, identify user, and just return the user. Now on similarly, there is another way of doing it. I mean, if you don't want to use the cookies, you can just return the token from here. Let's say we'll do it in the other way also. So here we are just returning a token, and logout is just only because once the token is generated, that token is valid till it gets expired. Okay. Now what we are going to do here is inside auth controller. Let's comment this out for now. And inside the login, what we are going to do is login. Okay. Here, this is simple logout. Login is here. Login is here, and what we are doing is we got the token. Let's say this method is returning a token. So we can just return a token. We can just use the request response, and instead of doing it something like this, we will be calling this method and return. Now you can generate an access token and the refresh token. This is simple token we are returning from the login. And for now, and on the logout, we are not doing much. We will decide what needs to be done here because it's a token based authentication. So until unless you don't store the token state in the database, there is no need of doing logout, because logout will not expire the token once the token is generated. Or you just store the state of the session inside a database, and when you do the logout, just delete the token from the database or some session ID. So if I do the login now, we have changed a little bit things. Okay, I need to remove this thing, otherwise it won't return any response. I will restart it and I do the login. So here, this is my token, right? Now this token can be sent inside authorization header. So let's say this is the fetch auth. Here I can say authorization, and it can be a bearer header, right? And this is my token. Now what needs to be changed in the JWT strategy? Because there are many ways in which you can extract the headers. So here we will be using extract headers from authorization, not from the cookies, right? We are just writing a custom utility here, but here it already provides. I think I can just say from auth header as a bearer token, and that's it, I think. So what it will do is it will automatically pass the authorization header, and then it will just try to validate if this token is valid. Okay, so here there are many methods. So from extractor, that means you need to write your own utility method. And from auth header as a bearer, that means you are passing the authorization header something like this. First of all, this you are passing inside the headers, and it looks like this. So this is bearer and your token. This is what you are passing inside a authorization header. So you can directly get it using this method, or you write your own utility methods to extract the token from coming inside a request.cookies and all. And here I can see when I hit this, I'm getting this. This is what I need, right? Because we are hitting the authentication, that means give me my current user session, and I'm just passing this token, that means I'm logged in. Okay, so this is pretty much simple implementation, but there are really important, very important points here while working with the multiple strategies. So here I'm using local strategy and JWT strategy. So remember few things which I also encountered problems. This strategy will be imported from passport JWT for the JWT strategy, and for the local strategy, this strategy will be imported from passport local. I mean, in the latest packages, it is being imported from NestJS passport, but that will create a problem. I mean, you will see really weird errors. So import strategy from passport local, and for JWT strategy, import strategy from passport JWT. And rest all, it's same thing for JWT. You are just you are extracting this from the headers. This local strategy is all about you are passing the username password in the body, and we are validating it using service method and adding that on the request.user. And here we have these two respective auth guards. One is a local auth guard, one is a JWT auth guard, for which are pointing to these respective strategies. Okay, so this is all about I mean, you can create a production level authentication APIs. Till now I'm covering these authentication API for Express TypeScript, and then Express TypeScript Mongoose, Express TypeScript Postgres, and then this is the same kind of authentication mechanism using NestJS, Postgres, TypoRM, Bcrypt, and all these mixed combinations of library. But this is purely on the NestJS. We have this Docker Compose, and we are using this PNPM workspace and the NX tooling to really make it production ready. So here I'm just keep adding all these modules. In the next video, we are going to work on GraphQL implementation. That's really going to be interesting, because on top of this, we are also going to use a GraphQL module, and we are going to asynchronously initialize the GraphQL module.forRoot async. And there are two different ways to create a GraphQL service with the NestJS: schema first and a code first approach. So let's explore that. I will push this code on the GitHub.